Governor Gretchen Whitmer proposed raising Michigan's gas tax by 45 cents per gallon by October 1st, 2020. An action that she said would raise more than $2 billion annually to fix Michigan's crumbling roads. We wanted to know what this statewide issue means to the region and, of course, to us here in the City of Westland. So we surveyed our residents on the gas tax, and joining us today is Dan West, the President and CEO of the Livonia Chamber of Commerce, John Hiltz of OHM Advisors, and Steve Smith, the City of Westland's Finance Director. Taking a local look at state and regional issues, you're watching In the W. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has been trying to get residents and business leaders to buy into her bid for a 45 cents a gallon gas tax hike that would raise $2.5 billion a year to fix the darn roads. It was part of her campaign platform, and she hit the road running once she took office. We have with us here today in the studio Dan West, President and CEO of the Livonia Chamber of Commerce, and John Hiltz, the President of OHM Advisors, and John's also a board member for the Livonia Chamber. Gentlemen, welcome to In the W.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, I know that both of you have been part of the conversation on infrastructure here of late. And Dan, I know the Livonia Chamber of Commerce recently came out in support of the governor's 45 cent a gallon gas tax increase. You want to talk a little bit about how that came about and maybe how some of the board members reacted to it?
Well, Governor Whitmer came to Livonia Stevenson High School for one of her town hall meetings. She's been going across the state doing this. We had 400 people show up. Many of our board members were there. And she made a very passionate, pragmatic argument for this. She didn't engage in finger pointing. She acknowledges that nobody wants to pay more in taxes, but a significant investment needs to be made in roads and how it trickles down and affects the rest of state government. So we listened to that, and then she asked us to consider supporting it. She met with us at a separate board meeting in May, and our board just, even though we have people of all political persuasions on our board, we're generally pragmatic thinkers, and we just feel this is a way to solve the problem. There's no other plan out there that came out there to solve it. And what was really interesting is that the 45 cent gas tax must go to roads and bridges. And I think for people that don't want to pay more in taxes, they are open to at least hearing about how lawmakers can't grab that money for other programs. It has to go to roads and bridges.
All right. So John, were you there that day? I know you've heard the governor's her proposal. So what were your thoughts on it?
I'd actually heard the governor speak at a business leaders event, and then was at the meeting in Lansing with her. I was very happy that the governor is so in tune with the 21st century infrastructure report that was created and enacted on by Governor Schneider. So he had put together, I think, a 39-person panel that really dove into all of our infrastructure issues, not just roads and bridges, but our underground infrastructure, our power grids and so forth. And we looked at the SULOCs, and everything was in that report. So it was very, very comprehensive. So she was very in tune with the details of that report. And it was interesting, as Dan had mentioned, what I wasn't familiar with was the idea of how to fund the $2.5 billion shortfall. And so to have a dedicated fund was very intriguing.
So I sit on the Michigan Municipal League Board of Trustees, and our board also came out in favor of the governor's proposal. And our board is made up of local leaders from all across the state of Michigan, and it's a bipartisan board, so that we had Republicans and Democrats on the board, and there was a lot of discussion, but the MML board also supported it. And at the end of the day, I think by supporting it, at least keeps the conversation going. I had a chance to watch the governor's proposal with some of the local leaders from Western Wayne County at one of the Plymouth Canton high schools. And at the time, I made a statement then that I appreciated her leadership on the 45 cents a gallon, because she's been very transparent about these are the numbers and this is the number that it takes to get us there. And she hasn't really backed down on it. And I got to think that because it hasn't been wholeheartedly supported, and I appreciate the Livonia Chamber and the MML supporting it, but a lot of people haven't supported it. So it would have been probably politically easy for her to maybe start to back that down. But she's stuck with it. And in today's day and age, you don't always see that type of leadership. So.
Well, Mayor, if I may add, a lot of business groups, trade groups, a lot of organizations, a lot of political leaders from both sides say $2.5 billion additional is the number that's needed. The debate is how do you get there? And like you said with the MML, the Livonia Chamber just simply wanted to say, hey, let's advance the conversation. Let's support 45 cents right now. There's really no other plan out there. I know a lot of organizations are encouraging lawmakers and the governor to come up with a plan, but they really have not come up with a plan as of yet. I'm sure they're working on it, but we decided, hey, let's advance the conversation. Let's support this thing.
Gentlemen, so a lot of residents think that, didn't we just fix this? I mean, we're paying more for our registration fees, and so, our residents are kind of think that, hey, I thought we already took care of this. How come the problem's getting worse? John, can you kind of weigh in on that? Or, I mean, is this a Michigan problem, or is this something you're seeing across the country, or?
Well, if there's such a thing as, I guess, misery loves company, we're definitely not alone in underfunding our infrastructure. Nationally, the numbers are about 3.6 trillion, which is just a number, who can comprehend that, right? 3.6 trillion shortfall annually across the country. When I look at Michigan, we are also experiencing that shortfall. When you look at infrastructure in totality, you're probably closer to over 4 billion annual shortfall. So the 2.5 that we're talking about, where would that put us, say, in comparison to some of our neighboring states? People view those roads as maybe a little bit better, and they are, because they're investing more in those roads. Michigan ranks in our region dead last in our level of investment in roads. The national average on a budgetary basis is in the 10% plus range. Michigan's a little over 6% in our investments. So we're investing less, and unfortunately those results are being experienced, and we've been doing it really for generations. It's not something that has come up overnight. This has been, for my entire career, 36 years, that I've been aware that we've been underfunding. Conditions are continuing to get worse, and I think our awareness is continuing to grow as to what that really means to us in not only roads and bridges, but also in our drinking water and storm sewers and all the other problems that we're experiencing today.
So, as we talk about the 45 cents a gallon, I think a lot of people, you try to figure out, like, what does that mean to me? Have either one of you guys seen a good way to maybe break down what is 45 cents a gallon in an additional gas tax? What does that mean to the average consumer or motorist? Have you guys seen a good breakdown of that?
It actually is in the governor's report, but I don't hear that emphasized enough, because I think that's important that people understand, what does it mean to me? And $2.5 billion is such a large number. I have no idea. It sounds astronomical. Even the 45 cents, who wants to pay more at the pump? But when you start to break it down and you start to realize that, one, we are spending a lot of dollars right now on other things that are indirectly related to bad roads and bad infrastructure. And when we wait for failures, that's catastrophic. That costs us by far more than it would be to maintain. But for an average driver, let's call an average driver 12,000 miles a year,
okay,
driving an average car of 20 miles per gallon, it would be $270 increased annual expense. Take that to 10,000, it would be $2.25. The plan is also to increase registration fees for, say, electric. They should share in the expense as well, right, using the roads. I think their increase would be $240 in annual increase. So it really, for the consumer, they really can figure it out on their own. Just, do the math of how many miles do I drive, divide that by how many gallons my vehicle gets, gallons per mile, multiply that by your 45 cents, it's going to be pretty telling.
If I may add, the hidden costs that for tires, for rims, for suspension systems adds up for consumers, ends up for businesses. We're absorbing those hidden costs right now. Our board believed that supporting this gas tax, that investment would reduce the hidden costs. John brought up for 12,000 miles, $270 a year. I have my vehicle, 70,000 miles. I need 2 new struts at 70,000 miles. It's $400. There's some of the costs right there we're absorbing.
So, John, under the way you laid it out, it's probably less than $1 a day.
Correct.
And the flip side, kind of like what you're talking about, Dan, is I think the numbers I've seen is the average motorist is probably spending somewhere between $400 and $600 annually on repairs. One tire, one rim, broken spindle or strut. And a lot of times people have car insurance, which will cover that, but a lot of times those costs fall below their deductibles, so that's coming right out of their pocket. So,
and those are the hard numbers. The intangibles are the safety aspects, right? The intangibles from a drinking water side, right, is our public health and well-being. Well, you're hearing of more and more motorists now that are potentially putting themselves at risk by dodging the bad road conditions and or having fatalities due to accidents that are incurred. So how do you put a price tag on those issues?
And kind of to kind of tee us up for today's show, we did a survey of Westland residents. We actually surveyed over 200 Westland residents about the governor's proposal, the 45-cent gas tax. What we found is overwhelming. Everybody agreed that we got to fix our roads and bridges. That it is a major issue. But what we did find was a little bit surprising. What we found is that 65% of the people that were surveyed, while they were willing to pay additional gas tax, they would only support 10 cents or less, a long ways from the governor's 45% proposal. Less than 15% said 11 to 20 cents, about 11% said 21 to 30%, less than 5% was 31 to 40 cents. And then just straight up yes or no on the 45 cents, we found that less than 10% would be willing to pay the 45 cents. So with that said, I think it is kind of an uphill battle, and I'm sure that residents in Westland are a lot like residents in Livonia and other communities. So what we also asked them too was if you agree that there is a problem there and you don't want to support it at the gas pumps, what are some other ways that the money could be raised? And what we found is that nearly 50% of those that responded to the survey said that the state should use marijuana money, the new revenue coming into the state from the emerging marijuana industry. Nearly 50% said that. About 25% said we should raise the licensing and tax trucks. Less than 5% said that a business tax should be added. 10% said perhaps we should be looking at toll booths. And about 15% said that the state legislature just needs to find 15% thought they just need to find cuts in their current budget. Then the last thing we asked them is that, what's your number one issue as far as Lansing that you think the legislators should work on? Because we wanted to see if roads were the number one issue, and what we found is that 55% said roads and infrastructure should be the state's top priority, followed by 30% for education, 5% for water, 5% for talent workforce, and about 5% on local government. So people are kind of all over the board there, but it did look that more than half of our residents surveyed thought that roads and infrastructure should be the top priority. With that, gentlemen, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back. We're going to continue this discussion on road repairs. I want to dig into you guys a little bit deeper on what are some of the causes for this and some of the potential fixes. With that, we'll be right back.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. At work or at play, you're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Oh, hey. She's cute. Nice going, man. Things are going great for you. You've earned a night out. Good drinks, good friends. Yeah, we can go ahead and call this a good night. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Not smart. Yeah, I saw that coming. Say goodbye to her. That'll hurt your bank account. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. I hope you like eating frozen dinners. Alone. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to In the W. So today we're talking about roads, and there's been a lot of talk in Michigan about roads lately. We're talking about the governor's proposal to add 45 cents at the gas pumps to help fund Michigan's roads and bridges. And Dan, John, now both of you, I know that you both attended the Mackinac Policy Conference a few weeks ago, and I kind of came right on the heels of the no-fault auto insurance reform, but there was a lot of talk about roads, and when you look at the survey in Westland, it looks like it would be a pretty tough road for the governor's 45 cents. What's your feeling after talking with legislators and business people on the island? Where do you think the governor lands on this? And John or Dan, we'll start off with you.
No, there's a lot of hope that the price break that we will see with insurance rates over the next year would be able to neutralize any kind of increase we would see with the gas tax. There's a lot of the hope with that. Now, I don't know the level of support in Lansing for 45 cents. I imagine what you'll see is a negotiation between legislative leaders and the governor on some sort of combination or compromise of things to get to that. But that $2.5 billion number is pretty much accepted as what the state needs to get to.
You have a feeling, John, on kind of where you think, is a compromise possible? I mean, they work together on auto insurance reform. Can they work together on this?
Well, you mentioned the policy conference, and first and foremost, I mean, I am so happy that it was elevated in its focus as a need. And as Dan referred to earlier, the $2.5 billion shortfall seems to be more widely accepted. And so the argument really comes down to how do we fund it? And so whether or not we apply all 2.5 at the pump, the advantage of that, obviously, as we talked about earlier, is the constitutionally protected funding. Is it likely that it'll be a combination? More than likely. That would be my speculation, that something will be done along that lines. I'm just hopeful that we don't compromise it to a number that is far less than what we need. Because when we've done that through the course of time, and we have funded roads and utilities in other ways in other years, that shortfall continues to make that top line number continue to grow. So the 2.5, if it's funded at 1.5, we're going to see continued deterioration of our road systems, of our bridges, of our underground infrastructure. So I'm hoping and I'm hopeful that we're looking at the magnitude.
All right, so you both did an incredible job of avoiding the I was trying to pin you in a corner on this, and you guys both very slickly dodged that. So I'll go first. I don't think that the governor's going to end up with 45 cents, and I'm not sure that going into it she thought she was going to. It's certainly the need, and she's done a good job. I think there's going to be some compromise. I personally think they probably come in somewhere between 20 and 25 cents. You saw our survey here. So is there a percentage or a number that you guys think that we're not going to hold you to this, but do you think that there is a compromise, and if so, what do you think the magic number is?
I think 20 cents could be taken, maybe 10 cents per year over a 2-year period. One thing the governor did say when she met with our board is that she was open to maybe getting to 45 cents over a longer period of time. Like her initial plan is 15 cents every 6 months, starting with the first round, maybe stretching it over several years to get to that level. But the key thing is, though, she wants to get the funding right there. But I think 20 cents people could accept. Again, the gas tax, when you tell people that it has to go to roads and bridges per the Constitution, I think people are a little bit more receptive to that idea.
I would agree, and I think that the education of the taxpayer is really the key, because if we pay more at the pump, say to the tune of the 20 cents, and then we supplement more of that 2.5 at our registration, we don't necessarily capture any of our visitors to our state who are also using our road system through the registration. We won't capture that additional funding. So the fact is that if I'm going to pay, as we talked about earlier, perhaps the $300 annual increase, personally, I would rather know that it's going towards roads and bridges and that it's a dedicated fund. So how will the consumer react to that? I think it has to do a lot with how we educate them, because I think our educated consumer is a wise consumer. I think they'll make decisions that are right for them as a voter if they truly understand it. Says, wait a minute, I'm just paying it out of different pockets, but you're asking me to pay it, some of it direct pay, some of it indirect pay. Ohio asked for 18 cents, and they settled up on 10.5 for pedestrian vehicles, but it went to 19 cents for diesel. That's great, that helps to generate the amount that they need, but more than likely that 19-cent diesel is coming back to the consumer via increased transportation costs that gets applied to the goods and services. So it's not that we don't pay it, we just pay it indirectly.
Exactly. AAA just came out this week and said that it looks like gas prices are going to be dropping, and that Michigan may soon have some of the lowest gas prices in the nation. They projected that within the next couple weeks, we may see gas below $2 a gallon in Michigan. Do you think that maybe perhaps this opens up a window of opportunity?
But it's in the current window. I mean, you look at any geopolitical international incident and oil prices go up and it affects us at the pump. So we're talking about a standing policy of raising the gas tax. So yeah, right now it'd be making it easier to sell now if that's the opportunity you're going to have right now. But we also talked earlier about the possibility of other sources of revenue, like we talked about the marijuana referendum, and even with that, when that is fully implemented and recreational marijuana is, we're talking about $20 to $40 million possibly with that. We're talking about $2.5 billion with that. And I know there's a lot of frustration with residents. 30 years, roads have been probably insufficiently funded, and they've been told it was going to be fixed, and it hasn't been. We're back at this discussion, but it's going to take a significant investment, and these other things just won't get all the way there for us.
So, John, I want to ask you, in the industry as an engineer, your firm has played an incredible part in the City of Westland as we start to reinvest in our infrastructure. One of the things that we hear from the consumers and our residents is that perhaps Michigan's not using the right materials on the roads, or that how come our roads, maybe they don't have warranties, or how didn't we just redo that road a couple years ago? You hear those type of things.
Sure.
What's the industry response to that?
Well, some of what we, the drivers, had experienced over the course of time, some of that concern was legitimate, not from the standpoint of bad designs, but there actually was a problem back in, I want to say late 90s, where the materials, there was an influence with a thing called ASR. That actually caused the surface of roads to deteriorate, the joints of our roads to deteriorate prematurely. And it stemmed really from the EPA coming in and saying, hey, your emissions plants have to change. In correcting that problem, the product actually changed. And it drove to a chemical reaction every time we introduced water into a joint, that the joints froze and deteriorated, and we had an early deterioration. That gave the consumers a sense that says, wait a minute, our cross-section is wrong. Michigan isn't building their roads any different than we build in Ohio or in Tennessee. We have to have adequate drainage, we have to have an adequate cross-section. The problem is that most of what we're seeing in our roads is that we're trying to apply as many fixes to as many roads as we possibly can, touch as many drivers as we possibly can, and so oftentimes we're putting in a cap when we should be doing a reconstruction. We're just trying to buy a little bit more time. Our best dollars are invested in maintenance before we have to do complete repair. But once a repair is needed, an overlay is never going to substitute for a reconstruction. And so it is going to fail prematurely. And that frustrates us because we don't expect that. We see a new surface and we think that that's going to give us another 20 years of life on that road, and it's just not practical.
Do you think there's a lot of talk about the heave or the freeze thaw in Michigan? There's a lot of talk about the trucks that they're overweight. I mean, does all that factor into the design as well?
You always are really looking at not so many, when we look at how we do our geometry of a road, you look at the number of cars. When you look at the cross section of the road, you look at the number of trucks. And I know that people are concerned that our trucks are breaking down our roads because we have a higher load capacity. What MDOT has looked at is axle loading. And what they've required is with the increase in load of a truck, they've had to put down more axles in order to reduce the overall axle loading, which is very practical. Their sense is that if you lighten the load, you're going to end up with more trucks, and therefore more cost to the consumer, but more damage to the roads by putting more trucks on the roads than are there already. So a very reasonable approach. So at this point, I look back at our neighbors and I look at how their roads compare to our roads. I think it really comes down not to the cross section of the roads or the weight of the trucks. I think it comes down to the level of investment. We're just spending a lot less to keep our roads in a good shape.
So my last question for Dan then is before we go to a break is, Dan, so based on what John just said there, can we be competitive with subpar roads and bridges in Michigan? I mean, do we need infrastructure to be competitive in the business world?
Absolutely. John and I talked about this up at Mackinac Policy with some other folks. We've heard some stories about companies that were looking possibly at Michigan for an expansion or a development of a new operation, and the roads was a serious factor in turning away, and that was something that our board seriously considered for workers and for the investment. They want to invest if the infrastructure is strong.
All right. Well, thank you both for joining us. We're going to come back we have one more segment. I'm going to bring in Steve Smith, our finance director, to join us. We're going to talk about another plan that was recently introduced at the state from the House leader that would actually have a very negative effect on local communities as they try to find a way to fix the road. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining me, and stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of In the W. He has served as the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer for the City of Westland since January of 2004. Please welcome to In the W, Steve Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Glad to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. And for those of you just turning in, we're also joined by the President of OHM Advisors, John Hiltz.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So, Steve, we've been talking about road repair. We've been talking about the governor's proposed 45-cent gas tax. Just recently, though, as that both the House and Senate start to try to figure out, in their minds, the best way to fund these road repairs, we saw a House bill come out that was actually sponsored by the House leader, Lee Chapman, and his proposal was that the state of Michigan would take all the sales tax that was collected at the gas pumps and divert that towards roads as well. So as we did the numbers here at In the W, we found out that's probably $600,000 or $700,000 that's collected annually, sales tax at the gas pumps. Can you talk a little bit about what that would mean to the communities? Because that money, is part of previous arrangements that we've made, agreements that we've made with the legislature on state shared revenue, is that a good portion of those funds go back and fuel communities. So can you talk about the potential effect that would have on local communities and maybe even here in Westland?
Absolutely. So obviously, any money you take away from the city will have an effect on it. And I can give a few examples over the years what's happened. The cities receive and townships receive money from the state called state shared revenues. There's two parts of that. There's the constitutional revenue, which is the cities and townships get 15% of 4% sales tax right now, and that's constitutionally guaranteed. And that one is more, as the economy does better, there's going to be more money collected on those, thus more money distributed. And then obviously if there's a recession, those monies will go down. Another portion of the state shared revenues is the statutory. Now, I can give you an example. Back in 2001, the city was receiving about $5 million a year for that. Currently, the city receives $1.3 million. So over all those years, it's gradually been reduced. And if the state would have just given us that $5 million we're at and kept it the same, the cities, at least in Westland's example, would have received $50 million more if they would have just left it alone. So when they go and talk about reducing...
One thing that's important about that is that money didn't go away. That money was still being collected, but they diverted it from local governments to state government.
Yes.
And then they pound their chests that the balance sheet for state governments never looked this good before.
And so when you look at just Westland's portion, $50 million, and you do that all over the state of Michigan, that's a big hit that the local governments took.
Well, just think that over that time period, what $50 million would have meant to the city of Westland. We talk, we talk public safety, we talk infrastructure, we talk investment, in a lot of other areas that we need. So
Absolutely.
It is an incredible amount of money. So if the House leaders' plan was to go through, if the way I understand it, it'd be about a $700 million cut to local communities. So that would, what it sounds to me, and John, you probably have an opinion on this too, it kind of sounds like that's the old rob Peter to pay Paul type of fixing things, and that's kind of what got us in this mess to start with.
We're serving the same customer base, we're serving the same taxpayer. And so if we put the stress, and we have put a lot of stress on our local government through the years with the different, the Proposal A and the Headley, and all of those things have and then ultimately the revenue sharing cuts have put a lot of pressure on local government to continue to deliver their areas of responsibility. Trust me, I'm very interested in seeing $2.5 billion invested in our major roads. I think that is the right thing for us to be focused on. But I think it's really important for everybody to understand that says, wait a minute, but that $2.5 billion doesn't come to my side street. It's not going to have an effect on that local street. That's still the local community's responsibility. Your water system is your responsibility, your sanitary sewer systems, your storm systems, your drains. Those all happen at the local level. So the $2.5 billion that we're talking about is important and it's needed. We'll have a trickle-down effect of the positive economic engines that may drive. But you're still going to have to deal with your own budgets to deal with those issues.
And I think that's something that kind of gets lost in, that gets lost in this conversation is that, at some point I think that motorists, they're going to pay additional, one way or another, to fix the roads. But at 45 cents, at 20%, whatever the number is, that's not going to fix the neighborhood streets. I know that some surrounding communities right now are working on putting road millages together. Mm-hmm. And part of their educational process is they have to educate people that even if the state passes a gas tax at the pumps, or another way to fix the roads, that's not going to affect our local roads. Now, off the camera, we talked about there's a website at the state of Michigan where you can actually look and see at the local level, which major roads would be fixed as part of this. And I think that Westland does have some of those roads. Mm-hmm. Where could our viewers go to look to see which roads in Westland would receive funding under that formula.
Boy, I wish I could tell you that website specifically. I can't, but
I kinda put you on the spot. We were
but I
talking
knew there
about
was
this
a.
off
I
camera.
know there's even a printed map right on the
Okay.
right on the walls there in the Senate building, and so I know that it exists, and I would believe that if you were to go on to the Michigan State Government website and search that, you'd be able to find that.
Okay, well, maybe we can put a link. We can put a link here on WLND. So, Steve, as we talk about, if that passes, we're going to see additional money for our major roads. Now, Westland, because of our size and how many roads we have, we get an allocation annually from the state of Michigan for our local and major roads. Can you talk a little bit about what that number looks like on an annual basis?
So on an annual basis, Westland receives about $5 million for the major roads and about 1.5, 1.7 million for the local roads. So, and we use those monies obviously for the maintenance of the roads, anything that comes up with regards to the roads. And obviously it's not enough, but the last gas tax that was passed back in 2015, we are starting to see some monies come in for that, an additional $800,000 a year split between the two. So that has helped. But any time, if they're proposing to take money away from state shared revenues to get enough money for the road fixes, it would just hurt us, ultimately.
So what was our number for local roads again?
About 1.5 to 1.75 million.
So we get 1.5 to 1.7 annually for our local roads. We have over 200 miles of local roads in the city of Westland. So one of the things that we have been doing, and as part of our proposed budget that we just adopted, is that Westland has a 5-year roads plan. We have a water and sewer plan that we're doing too, but we've adopted a plan where we're actually back in the neighborhoods. We're using those dollars. We're using them wisely. As you'd mentioned the previous thing, John, we're doing much more maintenance on our roads, trying to extend them. But as we're back in the neighborhoods, we're trying to stretch that $1.5 million out, and we're doing a lot of concrete replacement. We're doing some asphalt overlays and some other things that doesn't necessarily fix the problem, but it's a short-term solution, and we try to we got to be fair to our residents. We try to, spread that money as far as we can. So, John, not only Westland, but every other city, it's like the mayors are trying to come up with this do-it-yourself plan to try to fix our roads, and they're not giving us very much jelly to spread around.
No, they're not. Unfortunately, it's a lot of people would look and say, hey, our public works are not doing a great job. We work with a lot of different cities. We work with townships. We work with counties and state government. I'm impressed with the efforts that are made by local government and what they are able to achieve with the dollars they have available. Plain and simple, they just don't have enough dollars. They're doing what they can. The money is best spent in maintenance. But once a road has deteriorated to the point where it needs to have a reconstruction, all of the maintenance in the world isn't going to change the inevitable. And in fact, when you look at an asset management, they'll always talk about once you repave a road, put your money into joint sealing and things like that to keep it in good shape. Once a road gets past a certain pacer rating, you pretty much should let it go because you're not going to save it. Residents still want something done, right? If it's my street, I still want you to make an effort to fix the holes and do all of that. But even putting cold patch in potholes isn't really changing the ultimate condition of the road. It's just buying you a little bit more time.
We've been trying to be very transparent on our road conditions and where we're spending our dollars. And on the cityofwestland.com, you can go under the Department of Public Service, and you can see we have our Pacer ratings for all of our roads, and they're broken down by different colors. And I believe OHM probably helped us put this together. And so you can kind of see what condition our roads are in. You can see what condition your road is in. And then you can also take a look through our neighborhood makeover program, and you can see all the different programs, all the different projects that we're doing throughout the course of the year, and they correspond back to those Pacer ratings, where those roads that are at the bottom are the ones that are seeing more dollars, and the roads that are towards the top, we're being much smarter to spend maintenance dollars to maintain the life of those. But at the end of the day, it's definitely an uphill battle. I can tell you that I'm a big advocate to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. We go and we advocate at the national level that if in fact there is a federal infrastructure bill that's passed federally, is send that money right to the communities, because you can see we have these different programs in place. The cities know what they need to have done. All they need is the dollars to do it. So I'd advocate that a good portion of that money goes directly to the cities, because we've got shovel-ready projects that are ready to go. So
Right, absolutely.
that might, I'll get off my soapbox now, but that's one of the things that I'm trying to advocate, is to try to get more federal money directed right to Westland so we can fix our roads, as opposed to going to the state and then trying to find a formula to get it back to us.
Well, and we talked earlier about the importance of the dedicated funds, because why we wanted to see dedicated funds was because when we send money away, we want to make sure that it hits the mark of what it was intended and it doesn't get peeled off for other uses. And I think for a taxpayer, I think our trust factors are always higher at the local level, because we know these people and they seem to be in tune with our needs. And so residents typically trust local government to deliver the services a little bit more than they do the state, a little bit more than they do the federal. And so the more that we can keep at the local, the more we can keep in the state versus going federal, I think the better off we are.
And I think trust is a big issue on this, because as we talk with residents about fixing our roads and about supporting a potential new tax to do the roads, but we hear a lot from just about every demographic, is this going to be like the lottery? We were sold a bill of goods that the lottery was going to fix schools and education. So there's just a little trust factor there. So, but it's going to give us more to talk about in the future, right?
Absolutely,
All right.
absolutely.
Well, Steve, we appreciate you joining us and putting a little local flair to the numbers and to our needs. And John, you're an expert in your field. You're very well respected, not just in Michigan, but all throughout the country on infrastructure. So thank you for taking a few minutes to join us here today.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
having
Mayor.
me. Appreciate it.
And of course, we got to thank Dan West, our president and CEO of the Livonia Chamber. We lean on Dan for a lot of different things here in the City of Westland. He has a great working relationship with the Westland Chamber of Commerce, so we appreciate that. And with that said, there's no question that we need to do. There's a lot to do to fix the roads. As the governor calls them, they're the darn roads, right? But how we're going to do it and how we're going to pay for it is something that we're going to have to watch how it plays out over the next couple weeks. So we're going to be keeping an eye on that here at In the W. I also want to talk in the future a little bit more about some of the reforms that have just been passed on auto insurance and no fault. So that's something we'll be talking about here in the near future on In the W. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.